Hello.
Hello, police.
Yeah, what's the problem, sir?
We just drove down our farm track.
Yeah.
Go and feed our pheasants. We come across a Range Rover with 3 people in it.
Yeah.
It appears that they're dead. I don't know what's happening. Blood in the motor all over them.
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. In Saturday's Mail, we began telling the extraordinary true story of the Essex executions, the murder of 3 savage gangsters, Pat Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe, found shot dead in a Range Rover in December 1995. 2 men accused, Jack Womes and Michael Steele, are serving triple life sentences for the killings after being accused by a drug dealer turned supergrass called Darren Nichols. Both men strongly protest their innocence. Our inquiries have revealed that in the weeks leading up to their deaths, Tate and Tucker were planning to steal a major cocaine shipment from a group of East End criminals known as the Canning Town Cartel, who were tipped off about the intended double cross. We also reported that 5 months after the Essex executions and while Womes and Steele were in police custody, a close friend of Tate, John Marshall, was also shot dead in his car while £120,000 Tate had given him for safekeeping went missing. Despite the similarities, police insisted there was no link to the Essex killings. Here, in the concluding part of our investigation, we reveal who Underworld sources say really murdered Tate, Tucker and Rolfe, and why. We also reveal the extraordinary VIP treatment handed out to Supergrass Nichols. The Old Bailey trial of Mickey Steele and Jack Womes for the triple murder of Pat Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe began on September the 1st, 1997. It lasted almost 5 months and cost an estimated £1.5 million. Protection for Supergrass Darren Nichols, the chief prosecution witness, and his family was thought to have cost more than £300,000. The jury were out for 4.5 days, and despite their unanimous verdict, 3 women jurors broke down and wept as the foreman told the judge that Steele and Womes were guilty. As Justice Hidden noted, the case rested entirely on Darren Nichols. Quote, "I hardly need to stress the importance of Nichols' evidence. So much hinges on what he said." Nichols did not come across well in court. Nonetheless, he stuck to his story. On the day of the murders, December the 6th, he said he'd met Steele and Womes, whom he'd known for a couple of years, around 5 p.m. He said he was told they were going to meet Tate and others regarding a drug deal. The rendezvous was the Halfway House pub near Rettendon Essex, and he said they drove there in convoy, Steele in his Toyota Hilux, Womes and Nichols in the latter's VW Passat. Nichols told the court that the Passat was kept out of sight, while the Range Rover carrying Tate, Tucker and Rolfe swept into the car park. Steele left the Hilux and joined Tate in the back of the Range Rover, which then drove away. Nichols said that Womes, now dressed in a boiler suit and Wellingtons, directed him to the bottom of Workhouse Lane, the isolated scene of the murders. Womes got out and said he would phone when he needed to be picked up. At 7 p.m, said Nichols, he got a call to come and get us. It was only when he saw the 2 men's blood-splattered surgical gloves, Nichols explained, that he realised what had happened. His shock and terror were so great, he said, that he very nearly crashed the car. The prosecution said that after being dropped off by Darren Nichols, Womes hid in bushes and waited for the Range Rover to arrive. Tate, Tucker and Rolfe, guided by Steele, thought they were on a reconnaissance trip for a future cocaine deal, and unsurprisingly drove down Workhouse Lane. The end of the lane is barred by a locked gate, but the prosecution surmised that Steele had told the others he had a key. He got out to open the gate, and as pre-arranged, Womes came out of hiding, passed a gun to Steele, and the slaughter commenced. Both Steele and Womes had alibis. Steele, 54, produced a petrol and supermarket Visa receipt from 5 p.m. on December the 6th to show that he was in Colchester at the time and could not have been driving the Hilux, as it takes diesel. His former sister-in-law, postmistress Phyllis Stanbrook, testified that she had met Steele at his home at 7:30 that evening, but under cross-examination, she said she wasn't certain of the exact date. Steele's appearance in the witness box had not helped his case. Against the advice of his legal team, he began by regaling the jury with a long list of his previous convictions, mostly connected with drug importation. As he believed he was innocent, he thought he would be straight. He did not need to tell the jury of his murky past, but would do it as a token of honesty. It completely backfired. Jack Womes agrees he spent the evening of December the 6th collecting Darren Nichols' car, the same VW Passat. The vehicle had broken down and Womes, a mechanic, told Nichols he would collect the car and take it for repair. Womes had driven with a trailer to the halfway house pub where the Passat had been left, loaded up and called Nichols to tell him he was on his way back to the yard. Ian Bristow of the Forensic Engineers Association told the court that Womes could not have made the call asking to be collected from Workhouse Lane as alleged, because his mobile signal would not work on either of the two aerials covering the crime scene. The defence also pointed to the state of the Passat, which had no heater, a noisy exhaust, and to all intents a clutch that was unusable. Hardly an ideal getaway car for a triple murder. Moreover, the Passat apparently passed up and down Workhouse Lane without leaving any tyre marks or oil leaks. Intensive forensic tests on the car found no traces of blood, glass, or indeed any link with the murder scene. Although Womes allegedly lay in wait in the bushes by the gate and then, according to Nichols, took over the shooting because Steele's gun had jammed, he managed to glide invisibly away, leaving no trace. An impressive feat for a man 6'2" tall and weighing almost 19 stone. A single footprint was found by the offside back door, exactly where the killer would have stood. It was from a size 8 or 9 high-tech training shoe. Jack Womes is a size 11, and according to Darren Nichols, was wearing wellies. So what, according to Nichols, was the murder motive? Underworld sources have repeatedly alleged that in autumn 1995, Nichols bought £120,000 worth of cannabis from an Amsterdam dealer. Nichols distributed the cannabis to various investors in England, including Pat Tate, who had a £70,000 stake in the deal. The cannabis was found to be counterfeit, and a furious Tate let it be known that Nichols' life was in danger. Eventually, Mickey Steele, a friend of both Nichols and Tate, interceded. Steele was paid £2,000 by Tate to go with Nichols back to Amsterdam and secure a refund. This was achieved and the money handed over to Pat Tate. True to form, Tate kept the entire £120,000 and told the other investors Nichols had failed to pay up. Giving evidence on oath, Nichols simply swapped roles with Mickey Steele. He told the court it was Steele who set up the Duff cannabis deal, and Steele whose life was threatened by Pat Tate. Nichols' own credit card records proved he had gone to Amsterdam in November 1995. Nichols told the court he had gone to chaperone Steele and secured a refund. Nichols agreed that Tate, instead of taking the £70,000 he was owed, had kept the entire £120,000. He alleged Tate had told the remaining investors that Steele had kept their money and ripped them off. By way of revenge, said Nichols, Tate vowed he would bring Steele before the defrauded investors and make him beg on his knees for mercy. Then he would kill Steele in front of them. Tate's girlfriend, Sarah Saunders, was supposed to have informed Steele of Tate's lurid intentions. Nichols told the court he thought Steele and Saunders were having an affair. All the Underworld sources I spoke to regarding this account was pure fantasy. Saunders has strongly denied her part in the story and has always insisted that Steele was just a friend. Under cross-examination, Nichols admitted to being an informer for a police officer referred to as Detective Constable A in court, who was himself facing criminal charges. Curiously, Nichols said he would, quote, would have done anything to get Womes and Steele arrested, yet neither man knew Nichols had any previous ill feeling towards them. He also admitted that he knew Steele very well and had the means to make up a plausible story about him and his colleagues. When asked by David Lenneman QC if he, quote, ever thought about what being honest and dishonest was, he cheerfully replied, not particularly. Graham Parkins QC asked Nichols if he was a truthful man by nature. I don't think you could say I am, he answered, before hasting to add, I'm telling the truth now though. Darren Nichols gave the court a chilling description of the night of the murders. He spoke of his terror, his desire to get away, and to never see Steele or Wombs again. "So, Mr. Steele would hardly be on your Christmas card list?" asked Mr. Parkins. "No," said Nichols. "Can you explain then," asked Mr. Parkins, "why you sent his family a card for Christmas 1995 just over a fortnight after the murders?" 2 days after Christmas, Nichols had gone to Steele's house. He brought his little girls to the house of this triple murderer to watch the rabbits playing in the garden. He also continued doing odd jobs and electrical work for Steele for several months after the murders. Yet more bizarre was the treatment Nichols had while on remand. His cell was furnished with a multi-gym and colour TV, table, chairs and clothes cabinet. He also benefited from a takeaway meal service. "It is right," said Mr. Lederman, "that one day you would have Kentucky Fried Chicken, the next day taco chips." Nichols agreed. "Even a hot chocolate before you went to bed at night?" Mr. Lederman continued. "You were being given the VIP treatment." Nichols giggled. Yeah, I suppose so. But perhaps the greatest problem with Nichols' evidence is the question of authenticity. Police transcripts of his statement show numerous instances where Nichols appears to be prompted or led. Occasionally on the tapes of his interviews he appears to be reading. In fact, it was revealed in court that the same officers who interviewed Nichols had spent more than 30 hours in his cell talking with him off tape. One interview lasted 7 hours and 43 minutes. The police described these interludes as comfort visits. In court, even Nichols' own solicitor, Lee Craddock, admitted he was surprised at the number of hours spent talking to Nichols off tape, and agreed that this was an undesirable procedure. Nichols' evidence, however problematic, secured the convictions on January 20th, 1998. Justice Hidden sentenced Wombs and Steele to life with a recommendation they serve a minimum of 15 years. Darren Nichols was spirited away with his wife and family and given a new identity. "Of all the supergrasses in the system, I'm the tops," he said. Darren Nichols was arrested in May 1996 while in possession of 10 kilos of cannabis resin with a street value of £25,000. 4 months earlier, Essex police had questioned another man about the Essex executions and had been told a very different story. Billy Jasper was arrested in January 1996, well connected in the East End criminal world and described as a big bruiser of a guy. Jasper was shaven-headed and had a fondness for crack cocaine and heroin. He was guarded and not inclined to waste words. As the police began questioning him, Jasper changed tack and began talking about the Essex executions. Sullen and hostile, Jasper's replies and 5-word sentences began to build into an incredible story. He was telling police who murdered Tate, Tucker and Rolfe. Confidently, unhesitatingly, Jasper constructed a detailed picture of the slaughter on December the 6th. Why Jasper, a man used to police interrogations, should suddenly decide to talk is hard to ascertain. His former criminal contacts speculated that he hoped for a deal, perhaps to secure the VIP treatment later enjoyed by Supergrass Darren Nichols. Whatever the motive, Jasper's statement was dynamite. Sometime in late 1995, Jasper said he'd met a well-known villain called Jesse Gale at Morton's Bar in Canning Town. They were joined by a third man who for legal reasons I will refer to as Suspect X. Shortly afterwards, the 3 men moved to a Mexican restaurant and began discussing the prospects of Tate, Tucker and Rolfe. It is believed the 2 men accompanying Jasper were part of an East End cartel, the very same Canning Town cartel who, as I revealed on Saturday, had negotiated with Pat Tate and Tony Tucker over the sale and distribution of a shortly expected consignment of cocaine. Tate and Tucker, however, had no intention of paying for the drugs. They intended to steal the cocaine and had recently bought a submachine gun with this purpose in mind. Tate and Tucker had a long history of doing business in this fashion, and this would be their biggest heist to date. The Canning Town cartel thought differently. They had found out that the Essex men intended to roll them over and were planning what to do about it. Moreover, Underworld sources have told the Daily Mail that Gale and Suspect X had a personal score to settle. They had previously been involved in a drug steal and had been ripped off by Tate and Tucker and had lost out to the tune of £20,000. "Believe me," says the source, "losing that sort of money hurts. you're inclined to do something about it. According to Jasper's statement, Gale and suspect X talked about robbing Tate and Tucker, but X insisted it would be better to take them out of the game. He then asked Jasper if he wanted to earn 5 big ones to do a bit of driving. On the night of the murder, Jasper says he picked up a grey Fiat Uno Turbo from outside Peacock Gym in East London. He drove to a bar near Hornchurch where he picked up X, who was carrying a sports bag. The bag seemed to have a dead weight in it. The two men drove to the Windmill cab office at Upminster Bridge. Jesse Gale was standing outside. Taking the bag, suspect X got out and disappeared with Gale down the side of the building. Leaving Gale behind, X reappeared, still with the sports bag, directed Jasper to drive to Rettendon and was dropped off beside a lane. Jasper says X told him he was going to pick up 4 kilos of cocaine, and then he returned around 40 minutes later, carrying the sports bag and a rucksack. Suspect X then phoned Gale and told him everything was sorted. Jasper says at the time was just past midnight. He says that when he saw the news of the murders the following day, he realised what had happened. He met X at Morton's bar and followed him into the toilets to collect his money and a line of cocaine. I said to him, "You took them out of the game." Jasper says suspect X grinned and told him not to ask questions. Jasper was called by the defence, but the judge ruled that much of his evidence was inadmissible. Today, Jasper stands by his story 100%. Jesse Gale is saying nothing. He died in a car crash in May 1998. Gale's former associates believe the crash was no accident. They say he was murdered by friends of Tate and Tucker. Extraordinarily, police paid little attention to Jasper's story and made no apparent attempt to follow it up. Yet his detailed account seems to fit much of the available evidence. Police put the time of death at around 7 p.m, but this estimate is based entirely on the 3 men stopping answering their phones and the evidence of Darren Nichols. Astoundingly, Paula Lanas, the police forensic pathologist, never made any of the normal scientific tests to ascertain the time of death. When asked in court why not, she said it didn't seem important. However, 3 local witnesses gave statements to the police saying they heard shots between 10 p.m. and midnight on December the 6th. Another witness said he walked his dog along Workhouse Lane at night at 7 p.m. He was positive the blue Range Rover was not there. A later time of death might also explain the Range Rover being, as I reported on Saturday, untouched by the freezing weather when discovered early the following morning. Right, I just need to cut in here. Sorry to interrupt the flow of the piece. But it mentions there that a guy walked down the lane at 7 p.m. That's not correct. There was a young chap who walked near the lane at around 7 o'clock, but turned back to go home before reaching the lane. So yeah, that part is incorrect. Anyway, let's carry on. Then there is the question of the footprint, the size 9 high-tech training shoe. Billy Jasper said on the night in question that X was wearing a blue tracksuit, surgical gloves and Reebok trainers. If the police are dismissive of Billy Jasper, the same cannot be said for those who inhabit the criminal underworlds of Essex and East London. Everyone I spoke to confirmed Jasper's account to be accurate. They are also adamant that the Canning Town cartel were responsible for the murder of Tate's close friend John Marshall, the man, as I reported on Saturday, that Tate had entrusted with £120,000 worth of drugs money and was found shot dead in his car 5 months after the Essex executions. Police have always insisted there is no link between the 2 crimes, but the case remains open and no one has ever been charged over Marshall's death. Jack Womes and Mickey Steele have served just over 18 months of their life sentences. They have no hope of any future parole because both men continue to maintain their innocence and thus have failed to face up to their crimes. Jack Womes has been described as a model prisoner. Illiterate when arrested, he taught himself to read and write by following the tapes and transcripts of Darren Nichols' evidence against him. Now held at Whitemoor Prison, Cambridgeshire, he has passed 3 City and Guild certificates and was chosen for a Whitemoor Achievement Award in May. The citation said he had improved his life and the lives of others through learning, and noted his selfless willingness to help others. He is very well liked by staff and fellow inmates, said his prison tutor. Despite the guilty verdict, his former employers have remained loyal, and his job is still kept open for him. Darren Nichols described Jack Womes as the laughing assassin, a cold-blooded killer who calmly carried on blasting his victims as Steele's gun fell apart. The Range Rover in which the three died was bought 2 weeks ago by victim Craig Rolfe, who shared his pal's passion for motors. A neighbour in Rettendon Essex said yesterday, quote, "He always seemed to have different cars on his drive, as if he was a car dealer. There were rumours he was involved with stealing cars and selling drugs. One time I saw police literally dismantling a car on his drive." Rolfe, 26, shared a 3-bed detached house with girlfriend of 7 years, Donna Jaggers, 26, and their 6-year-old daughter. They moved into the £80,000 home on the commuter estate of Chafford Hundred about 18 months ago. A woman living nearby said the couple seemed quite secretive. They always kept their curtains drawn and had little contact with their neighbours. She added, quote, "We sometimes saw them walking their dog, but on the whole they were rarely to be seen. Just a week ago there was a police pickup truck outside his house, and about 6 months ago the house seemed to be subject of police surveillance. We saw men sitting in cars outside the house on several occasions." Several neighbours remembered seeing the blue Range Rover in which the men were found dead. Yesterday, Rolfe's house, set on the end of a row of 4 homes, was deserted, and the curtains closed. The following newspaper article is from the 11th of December 1995, with the headline, "Police warn of gang war after drug murders." Police investigating the murder of 3 drug dealers on a remote Essex farm track fear more violence could erupt as rival gangs try to move into the area. Yesterday, as further details emerged of the criminal careers of the 3 victims, Detective Superintendent Ivan Dibley warned that the murders could trigger a turf war. He said, quote, "I know that when 3 people who are involved in drug dealing are taken from the scene, somebody will try to fill the void that is created," he said. "I anticipate because of that there will be a power struggle taking place and potentially there could be more violence." The dead men, Craig Rolfe, 26, Patrick Tate, 37 and Tony Tucker, 38, all from the Basildon area, had been involved in a range of crimes from petty theft to armed robbery. But recent intelligence had shown that they were moving into the drugs trade as wholesalers rather than street traders. They were, said Mr. Dibley, quite high up the drug dealing hierarchy, peddling the complete range of illegal narcotics. However, Mr. Dibley ruled out any direct connection with Leah Betts, the Essex teenager who died after buying an ecstasy tablet at a Basildon nightclub. He said, quote, "There has been a lot of speculation that the killings are linked with the tragic death of Leah Betts. This is pure speculation. There is nothing to link these 3 men with Leah's death, and this suggestion may well divert attention from the real investigation." Mr. Dibley said that the men had been threatened, quote, "The drugs world is a very murky world. There has been so much publicity in recent weeks. It is clearly easy money, and it is known that there are power struggles among dealers." Police are unclear why the men were murdered. One theory is that they were killed by a rival gang trying to prevent them muscling in on a lucrative trade. Mr. Dibley continued, "There are no signs that any attempt was made to escape from the car. These people were more than street dealers, and it may be that others were trying to prevent them getting into a greater position of power." An alternative police theory was that the deaths of the 3 men who worked together were linked to an unpaid debt. The post-mortem examination results confirmed that the 3 men were killed with a shotgun. 7 cartridges were found in the snow close to the car. Rolfe, who was in the driver's seat of his Range Rover, and Tucker, who was sitting alongside him, were both shot in the head. Tate, who was in the back seat, died of multiple shotgun wounds. Police are not sure whether the killer arrived in the Range Rover with his victims and if he had an accomplice. Mr. Dibley, who said there was no evidence of a struggle in the car, said, "I suspect that these shootings were carried out very quickly. There are no signs that any attempt was made to escape from the car." The post-mortem examination, which was carried out more than 24 hours after the bodies were found at the remote track at Rettendon near Chelmsford, was unable to confirm the time of death. But Mr. Dibley said Rolfe failed to make a rendezvous with his girlfriend Donna Jaggers at 8 p.m. on Wednesday. Yesterday, Miss Jaggers, the mother of his 6-year-old daughter, made a tearful appeal for anyone with information to come forward. She said, quote, "I would just like anyone who was with them, who knows anything about what has happened to them, or if they saw anything, to just come forward." The following newspaper article is from the 9th of December 1995, with the headline, "Only their mums will miss these evil beasts." Only the mothers and girlfriends of the 3 murdered drug barons wept for them yesterday. People living in the Essex mobster's manor did not hide their relief that the dealers paid the ultimate price for their evil. Pat Tate, 37, Craig Rolfe, 26, and 38-year-old Tony Tucker were executed by a hitman in their Range Rover after being lured to a drugs meet on a snowy country track. A pensioner calling at a newsagent's near Muscleman Tate's Basildon bungalows said, quote, "There will be no tears shed for them round here. All three were parasites who preyed on kids. I'll be raising a glass tonight to the man who killed them. I only wish he'd got 20 more." Tate had been in and out of prison for armed robbery and weapons offences, but his grief-stricken mother Marie insisted, quote, "My Pat was not the evil monster he is being portrayed as. To me, he was a lovely boy." The 56-year-old widow added, "Whatever he may have done, he did not deserve to die like this, shot to pieces in a Range Rover." Tate's tearful ex-lover, Sarah Saunders, insisted he was not all bad. Blonde Sarah, mother of his 2-year-old son, claimed he was once a lovable rogue, but he was turned into a violent beast by drugs given to him while he was in jail. Sarah, 28, said, "I still have feelings for him. You can't just switch off. But the man shot dead wasn't the caring man I knew. The drugs Pat took in prison changed his personality completely, and it terrified me." The pair were pictured happily together at Marie's house 3 years ago, following Tate's release from a term he served for armed robbery. He wrote on the back of the snap, "First weekend home in Mum's garden." But after a 10-year romance, Sarah quit Tate's Basildon home 5 weeks ago as he ended another jail stretch. She said, quote, "We had split up, but it is still a horrible shock when someone you have been so close to has been killed so horribly." Craig Rolfe's girlfriend, Donna Jaggers, broke down as she appealed for information that will snare the hitman. The 26-year-old blonde sobbed, "Anyone who knows anything or saw anything, could they just come forward, because we need all the help we can get." Police said Tate, who was in the back of the Baron's Range Rover, was blasted 3 times in the head and chest with a 12-bore shotgun. Driver Rolfe and Tucker were both shot twice in the head. Tate's death came 8 months after he survived a previous hit attempt. The man heading the murder inquiry, Chief Superintendent Ivan Dibley, said the trio were high up the drugs chain and may have been the victims of a double-cross. He warned of an all-out turf war between rival gangs as other villains tried to step into the void left by the victims. Mr. Dibley could not confirm whether the trio dealt in the killer drug ecstasy or if they were linked to the death of 18-year-old Leah Betts. 2 17-year-old Basildon youths were held yesterday and charged with supplying a drug to Leah. They will be in court next month. The following newspaper article is from the 9th of December 1995 with the headline, "Monster beat up diner boss over a pizza." Brutal bodybuilder Pat Tate went berserk in a pizza parlour the night before he was killed. He gave a chilling demonstration of his ferocity when he hurled the shop till against the wall, punched manager Roger Ryle and swashed his head into a glass plate on the sink. Roger, 21, suffered a gashed forehead, bruises and concussion in the frenzied attack, but he said he did not press charges after police told him Tate was well known to them and might do him more damage if he took action. Hulking Tate, who weighed 18 stone, drove from his Basildon home to the town's London Pizza Company branch after arguing with Roger on the phone. A woman who was with him called to demand the delivery of a pizza with 4 different toppings on each quarter. When Roger tried to explain it was not on the menu, Tate grabbed the phone and screamed, "You will deliver the pizza I want or I'll come round and get it." Roger refused because of his attitude. Half an hour later, Tate burst in and attacked him in front of his girlfriend Sally Tilbrook, 16, who also works there, and the delivery boy. The manager said, quote, "When I heard he had been killed, my first thought was, it couldn't have happened to a nicer fella." Sally said, quote, "He had this horrible thick stare and seemed calm and cruel." Tate spent thousands transforming his bungalow after moving in 2 years ago. Yesterday, a Swish Mercedes and VW Passat were parked in the drive. But a neighbour said, quote, "They are bangers compared to some of the motors I've seen round there. Porsches, brand new Mercs, and even a fantastic Rolls Royce would roll up regularly. Everyone used to wonder where he got all his money from, but no one dared to ask."